What would you do if the person you mock turned out to own everything you depend on? The question hangs in the air like steam from fresh coffee at Moonwatch Cafe, where morning light filters through tall windows, casting long shadows across polished floors. Serafina Duskmore moves between tables, her steps quick and practiced, coffee pot in one hand, order pad in the other, the rhythm of service as familiar as breathing. She's worked here 2 years, saving every tip, every dollar for culinary school. Applications stacked neat on her nightstand, dreams measured in tuition costs. The cafe hums with quiet conversations, clinking silverware, the gentle whoosh of the espresso machine operated by Lyra Stormwind, who nods good morning from behind the counter. Regular customers know their names. Mr. Thornvale, with his black coffee, reads the financial section, never looks up from his paper, but always leaves exact change plus a $5 tip. Mrs. Emberfall orders the same scone, raspberry with clotted cream, sits by the window, sketches people passing by, her weathered hands still steady with the pencil. This is Serafina's world, predictable, safe, earned through honest work, until the door chimes and everything changes. He enters like he owns the place, which she doesn't know, yet he actually does. The man is older, maybe 60, dressed in all black leather jacket, despite the warm morning, sunglasses pushed up on his head, revealing dark eyes that seem to take in everything. Steven Seagal, though she doesn't recognize him, walks to the corner table, the one that stays empty even during rush hour, though she's never understood why his movements are different, deliberate, like every step has purpose, hands that hang loose but ready, the way some people carry themselves when they've seen things done, things most people only watch in movies. Serafina approaches, order pad ready, professional smile in place, the same greeting she's given 1,000 customers. Good morning, what can I get started for you? He looks up slowly, studies her face, not unkind but intense, like he's reading something written there in a language she doesn't know. Coffee black, he says simply, voice gravelly, worn smooth by years. That's it? She asks. We have pastries, fresh muffins, the banana bread is really good today. Just coffee. Something about his tone makes her defensive, like he's judging the place, finding it lacking, not worth his full attention. She's seen customers like this before, people who think they're too important for small neighborhood cafes, who make servers feel small with their dismissive attitudes. You know, she says, setting down the coffee cup, harder than necessary. If you wanted fancy, there's a Starbucks 3 blocks down. The words slip out before she can stop them. 2 years of perfect service thrown away in one moment of wounded pride. His eyebrows lift slightly, the first real expression she's seen from him. Is that right? As she continues digging deeper, I mean, this is just a regular place for regular people, nothing special about it. The cafe goes quiet, other conversations fading, like everyone senses something shifting in the air between them. Steven Seagal leans back in his chair, studies her with new interest, not angry, just curious, like she's a puzzle he's trying to solve. Regular people, he repeats slowly, nothing special exactly, she says, crossing her arms. So if you're looking for 5-star service and gourmet, whatever, you might want to try somewhere else. The silence stretches, uncomfortable. Now even the espresso machine seems to have paused, waiting. Then he nods once, reaches into his jacket, pulls out a worn leather wallet, places a 20 on the table for a $3 coffee. Keep the change, he says quietly, standing up, the coffee untouched. Regular people, he adds, walking toward the door, deserve respect too. The door closes behind him with a soft chime, leaving Serafina standing there, heart pounding, watching through the window as he disappears around the corner. It just happened, Lyra asks from behind the counter, her voice barely audible. I don't know, Serafina whispers, staring at the $20 bill still on the table, like evidence of something she can't name. The morning continues, other customers come and go, but the corner table stays empty the way it always has, and Serafina can't shake the feeling that she just made the biggest mistake of her life. The question echoes in the space he left behind. What would you do if the person you dismissed held your future in their hands? She's about to find out. The rest of the morning passes in a blur of forced normalcy. Coffee pours, orders taken, smiles that feel painted on, but Serafina's hands shake just slightly as she wipes down tables, the $20 bill now folded in her apron pocket, burning like a coal. Lyra watches, her concern creasing her features the way it does when someone you care about is clearly drowning but won't admit it. You okay? She asks during a lull, steam wand hissing softly between her words. Fine. Serafina lies avoiding eye contact, busying herself with already clean surfaces. The lunch rush brings distraction, familiar faces, familiar orders, the comfortable chaos of a neighborhood place where everyone knows everyone else as usual, but underneath the routine continues. Something has shifted, like a foundation stone moved just enough to make everything slightly unstable. 3 o'clock arrives with the afternoon sun slanting through windows, highlighting dust motes dancing in golden air. The door chimes, and Talon grieves. Enters the cafe's owner, though he rarely visits during operating hours. Serafina has met him maybe 5 times in 2 years, always polite, always distant, the kind of boss who trusts his managers to handle daily operations. But today his expression is different, serious, like someone carrying news that can't wait. Serafina, he calls softly, "Can I see you in the back office?" Her stomach drops the way it does in elevators when the cables snap. Lyra shoots her a questioning look, but Serafina just nods, follows Talon through the narrow hallway past storage shelves lined with coffee beans and paper cups. The office is small, cramped, barely room for a desk, 2 chairs, and filing cabinets that have seen better decades. "Sit down," he says gently, and she knows with terrible certainty that her life is about to change. "I got a call today." He begins settling into the chair across from her, from someone named Draven Ashwin. The name means nothing to her, but Talon's tone suggests it should. "He works for Steven Seagal." Talon continues, and Serafina's blood turns to ice water. "Apparently, you had an interaction with Mr. Seagal this morning." "I didn't know," she whispers, the words tumbling out. "I didn't know who he was. I thought he was just some arrogant customer." Talon raises a hand, stopping her flood of explanations. "That's not why I'm telling you this," he says quietly, his voice carrying something like wonder. "Serafina, do you know who owns this building?" She blinks, confused by the shift in direction. "You do," she says slowly. "Don't you?" Talon shakes his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I lease it," he explains, "have for 8 years from a property management company that handles dozens of buildings downtown. But the actual owner, the person who could evict us tomorrow if they wanted, has always been a mystery." The room seems to grow smaller, walls pressing inward as understanding begins to dawn. "This morning," Talon continues, "I found out who that owner is." He reaches into his jacket pocket, pulls out a business card, slides it across the desk. The card is simple, elegant, heavy stock paper with embossed lettering: Seagal Properties, Steven Seagal, Principal Draven Ashwind, Manager. Serafina stares at the card, words swimming before her eyes. "He owns the building," she whispers. "He owns the building," Talon confirms, "and apparently has for 12 years. The coffee shop, the bookstore next door, the yoga studio upstairs, the vintage clothing boutique on the corner, all of it." Her hands begin to tremble, not the slight shake from earlier, but full tremors that make the business card flutter like a leaf. "I insulted him," she says, voice barely audible. "I told him to go to Starbucks. I told him this place was nothing special, that he should leave." Talon nods slowly, his expression unreadable. "According to Mr. Ashwin, Steven was quite impressed by you." "Impressed?" The word comes out as a squeak. "By your honesty," he said, "by the fact that you treated him like everyone else. No special deference, no recognition, just straightforward service, until you thought he was disrespecting the place you work." Serafina's mind reels, trying to process this information that turns everything upside down. The man she dismissed as arrogant owns her livelihood, her co-workers' jobs, the very walls around them. But instead of anger, instead of retribution, he was impressed. "What happens now?" she asks, voice small, already imagining packing her apron, saying goodbye to the only job she's ever loved. Talon's smile widens. "Just a fraction. That's what we're about to find out," he says, standing up, smoothing his shirt. "Mr. Ashwind is coming by at 4 o'clock to discuss what he called a proposal." "A proposal?" "Something about expanding operations." He was vague, but mentioned specifically that Steven wants to meet with you again. The clock on the wall shows 3:45, which means 15 minutes to prepare for whatever comes next. Serafina sits in the small office, surrounded by the familiar scents of coffee and paper, trying to understand how one moment of misplaced pride has led to this. Outside the door, she can hear Lyra handling the afternoon customers, the normal sounds of a normal day in a place that suddenly feels anything but normal. The question returns, persistent as a heartbeat. What would you do if your biggest mistake became your strangest opportunity? In 15 minutes, she'll find out. 4 o'clock arrives like a verdict, sharp and final. The door chimes, and Draven Ashwind enters, tall and lean, wearing a charcoal suit that costs more than Serafina makes in 3 months. His presence fills the small cafe, not with arrogance, but with quiet authority, the kind that comes from handling important matters for important people. Lyra looks up from the espresso machine, eyebrows raised in silent question, but Draven moves with purpose, straight to where Talon waits by the corner table. The same spot where Steven sat this morning. Serafina watches from behind the counter, where she's been hiding for the past 15 minutes, polishing the same cup over and over until it gleams. Mr. Greaves, Draven says, extending his hand. Thank you for accommodating this meeting on short notice. Of course, Talon replies, gesturing toward the back office, though Draven shakes his head. Actually, he says, I prefer to speak here in the cafe if you don't mind. His eyes find Serafina across the room, not unkind, but measuring him. Duskmore, could you join us, please? Her legs feel like water, but somehow she manages to walk across the cafe floor without stumbling. The afternoon light streams through windows, illuminating 3 chairs arranged around the corner table like a tribunal. Please sit, Draven says, and his voice carries the same gravelly undertone as Steven's, though softer, more diplomatic. First, he begins settling into his chair. I want to assure you that no one's job is in jeopardy here, Mr. Seagal was quite clear about that. Serafina releases a breath she didn't know she was holding. In fact, Draven continues, he was impressed by your loyalty to this establishment, the way you defended it, even to someone you perceived as dismissive. He reaches into his briefcase, pulls out a folder thick with documents. Steven owns 43 properties in this city, he says, opening the folder. Restaurants, cafes, retail spaces, small businesses that form the backbone of their neighborhoods. But this place, he taps the table with one finger, has always been special to him. Why? Talon asks the question Serafina wants to voice, but can't. He because 15 years ago, when Steven was going through a difficult time, he would come here every morning just to sit in this corner. The original owner, an elderly woman named Isolde Nightshade, never recognized him, never made a fuss, just served coffee and left him alone to think. When she decided to retire, Steven bought the building to ensure it would remain a neighborhood coffee, a place where people could just be people. Draven pauses, letting the weight of this history settle between them. Isolde passed away 5 years ago, but Steven has continued her tradition of supporting local businesses, quiet investments that keep communities alive. Serafina finds her voice finally. So when I told him to go somewhere else, you were doing exactly what Isolde would have done, Draven says, with a slight smile, protecting the character of the place from someone you thought didn't belong there. Irony isn't lost on Steven. He opens another section of the folder, revealing architectural drawings, detailed sketches of expansion plans, which brings us to why I'm here. He continues, Steven wants to expand Moonwatch Cafe, not change it, expand it. The space next door becomes available next month when the bookstore relocates. Steven is proposing to lease that space to UMS Duskmore for a culinary venture. Serafina's world tilts sideways to me. A full kitchen, Draven explains, pointing to the drawings attached to the cafe, but with its own entrance, farm-to-table lunch menu, evening dining, small plates, the kind of place that honors ingredients and technique. The investment would be Steven's, but the vision, the execution, the daily operations would be yours. Talon leans forward, studying the plans, his expression shifting from confusion to amazement. This is incredible, he murmurs, but why Serafina? She's never run a restaurant before. Because, Draven says, looking directly at Serafina. Steven believes that passion combined with proper mentoring creates better restaurants than experience without hard scene too. Many technically perfect places that lack solely your defense of this cafe this morning showed him the kind of protective instinct that makes great restaurateurs. Serafina stares at the drawings, seeing her dreams sketched in blue ink and careful measurements. But I don't have culinary training, she whispers, which is why part of the proposal includes enrollment in the Institute of Culinary Excellence, full scholarship, while you work here part-time, learning the business. Before we continue, Draven says, setting down his pen, I'm curious, where are you watching this unfold from? The question hangs in the air, strange and direct, as if he's speaking to someone beyond their conversation. Serafina looks around the cafe, seeing Lyra listening intently. From behind the counter, a few customers nursing afternoon coffee, absorbed in their own worlds. It feels surreal, like watching her life happen to someone else from a great distance. The opportunity spreads before her, larger than anything she dared imagine, but with it comes the weight of knowing that her sharp words this morning somehow transformed into this moment. What would you do if your worst behavior became the key to your best future? The drawings wait for her answer. The silence stretches between them, heavy with possibility and terror. Serafina stares at the architectural drawings, seeing her future mapped out in precise lines, but feeling completely unprepared for its enormity. This is too much, she finally whispers. I can't accept this. Why not? Draven asks gently, his tone suggesting he's heard this response many times before. Because I was rude, because I don't deserve it, because what if I fail, what if you succeed? He counters, the question hits her like cold water, forcing her to confront the fear beneath her protests. Have you been saving for culinary school for 2 years? She says, slowly working double shifts, living on ramen and determination, but this is like winning the lottery for being mean to a customer. Talon reaches across the table, places his hand over hers. Serafina, he says quietly, I've watched you for 2 years. I think, she says slowly, my life just changed, but I don't know if that's wonderful or terrifying. Both. Talon says quietly from across the table, the best opportunities usually are. The afternoon sun shifts lower, casting longer shadows across the floor. While Serafina sits with her future wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. What would you do if everything you wanted was suddenly possible, but required becoming someone you've never been? The package waits, holding secrets from a woman she never met, but somehow feels connected to. Tomorrow, Steven Seagal returns for her answer night. She unwraps the past to understand her future. Evening settles over the cafe like a familiar blanket, the last customers drifting away into twilight streets. Lara locks the door, flips the sign to closed while Serafina sits at the corner table, the wrapped package before her untouched. You going to open it? Lyra asks, settling into the chair Draven vacated hours ago. Scared to, Serafina admits, running her fingers along the string that binds the brown paper. What if it changes everything? Lyra laughs softly, the kind of sound that carries affection and gentle mockery. Honey, your life already changed the moment you told Steven Seagal to find a Starbucks. This is just the next chapter. Talon emerges from the back office, keys jingling, ready to leave, but stops when he sees the unopened package. Still debating? He asks. Serafina nods, feeling the weight of too many decisions pressing down on her shoulders. Then let me tell you something about Isolde, he says, pulling up a chair. I was working here when she owned the place, started as a busboy when I was 16. She was fierce protective of this space and everyone in it, but she was also the most generous person I've ever known. He gestures toward the package. Whatever she left was chosen carefully with love and purpose. That's not something to fear. Serafina takes a deep breath, the way people do before jumping off high cliffs into unknown water. The string unties easily, as if Isolde knew nervous fingers would struggle with complicated knots. The brown paper falls away, revealing a leather journal worn smooth by countless hands. Inside the front cover, elegant handwriting in faded blue ink. Asterisk, for whoever loves this place. Next, Isolde Nightshade. Asterisk. Serafina opens to the first page and gasps. Recipes, dozens of them written in the same careful script, but not ordinary recipes. These are stories wrapped in ingredients, memories preserved in measurements. Steven's coffee cake, the one that brought him back every morning for 3 months when the world felt too heavy to carry. Honey lavender scones for the young mother who cried quietly in the corner booth while her baby slept. Sweetness to balance the salt of tears. Ravens, soup, chicken, and herbs for the old man who ate alone but never felt lonely here among friends he'd never met. Page after page of recipes paired with the people they were meant to heal. Lara leans closer, reading over Serafina's shoulder. These aren't just recipes, she whispers. They're love letters to everyone who ever found comfort in this place. Serafina turns pages, slowly, reverently, understanding now why Steven saw something sacred in this corner table. Isolde hadn't just served coffee, she had served hope for the young woman who dreams of cooking but doubts her worth. The heading stops, Serafina's breath written as if Isolde had known she would be here, reading these words. Grandmother's bread, simple ingredients, flour, water, yeast, salt, but baked with intention, rises despite doubt, becomes sustenance for those brave enough to knead their dreams into reality. Secret ingredient is not technique, but the belief that everyone deserves to be fed well, to be cared for, to matter. Start with this recipe. Trust will follow. Tears blur the words, but Serafina keeps reading, finding more than instructions, finding permission to believe in herself. The journal continues, 47 recipes, each one attached to a story, a person, a moment when food became medicine for hungry souls. Near the back, another note, in different handwriting, darker ink, more recent. Asterisk. Serafina, I hope these recipes find their way to your new kitchen. Steven. Asterisk. He had known before she did that she would say yes. The certainty should feel like manipulation, but instead it feels like faith, someone believing in her future before she could see it herself. Lyra wipes her eyes with her apron. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever read. She says, you have to do this. You have to honor what is sold. Started to loan nods agreement. His own eyes suspiciously bright. She's right. He says this isn't just about a restaurant. It's about continuing something important. Serafina closes the journal, carefully holding it against her chest like a shield against doubt. The recipes feel warm in her hands, as if Isolde's love still lives in the pages. She thinks of Stephen sitting alone in this corner, carrying whatever darkness drove him here morning after morning, and of Isolde quietly feeding his hunger for more than coffee, for connection, for a place where he could just be human now. That circle waits for her to close it. What would you do if someone you'd never met left you the tools to change lives through simple acts of nourishment? The journal holds the answer, written in recipes that are really instructions for building community, one meal at a time. Tomorrow morning, Stephen returns for her decision, but tonight Serafina finally knows what that decision will. Beta recipes have shown her who she's meant to become. Morning arrives with the weight of transformation. Serafina stands before her bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., studying her reflection like she's meeting herself for the first time. The journal sits on her kitchen counter beside a cup of coffee. She's too nervous to drink today. She becomes someone new or stays exactly who she's always been. The choice feels impossibly large. She arrives at the cafe 30 minutes early, finding Lyra already there setting up the espresso machine with extra care. You decided. Lyra says not a question, but quiet certainty. Yes. Serafina whispers, then louder. Yes. The word feels like stepping off a cliff, trusting wings. She's never tested. Lyra crosses the cafe, pulls her into a hug that smells like coffee beans and hope. Isolde would be proud, she murmurs against Serafina's ear. The morning unfolds with strange normalcy. Regular customers ordering usual drinks, unaware that history is about to pivot at table 12. Mr. Thornvale arrives exactly at 7:15, nods his greetings, spreads his financial section like a prayer rug across the familiar surface. Mrs. Emberfall follows 20 minutes later, orders her raspberry scone, settles by the window, sketchpad ready to capture the world outside, but the corner table remains empty, waiting. 8 o'clock arrives with mathematical precision, and the door chimes. Steven Seagal enters wearing the same black jacket, same deliberate walk, same dark eyes that seem to catalog everything. But today Serafina sees him differently, not as a difficult customer, but as the man who sat here morning after morning 15 years ago carrying pain she can't imagine, who found healing in Isolde's quiet care and never forgot the gift of sanctuary. He approaches the corner table, nods to Serafina with something that might be nervousness. A mess. Duskmore, he says simply. Mr. Seagal, she replies, her voice steadier than she expected. They sit across from each other, the table bearing witness to another pivotal conversation. Read Isolde's journal. Serafina begins, holding the leather book between them. Every recipe, every story, every person she fed and healed. Stephen's expression softens visibly, the hard edges of his face relaxing into something almost vulnerable. She was remarkable, he says quietly, changed my life without ever knowing how broken I was when I first walked through that door. Serafina opens the journal to the page with Stephen's coffee cake. You were grieving, she says gently, not a question. Stephen nods slowly, his hands folded on the table, scarred knuckles telling stories of their own. My mother, he says, had just passed cancer, took her slowly, and I watched helpless, felt like I'd failed at the most important thing, protecting someone I loved. He pauses, gaze distant, traveling back through years. I was angry at the world, at myself, at God, at everyone who got to keep their mothers. But Isolde never asked questions, never tried to fix me, just served coffee and that cake every morning until the grief became bearable. Serafina feels tears, threatening, understanding now why this place matters so much to him. She saved you, she whispers. He saved me, Stephen corrects by showing me that sometimes healing happens through simple acts of daily kindness. That's what I want to create with the restaurant, not just good food, but sanctuary for people who need what I needed, what Isolde gave me, a place where nourishment means more than nutrition. Serafina looks around the cafe, seeing it now through his eyes, through Isolde's legacy. The morning light streams through windows, illuminating dust motes that dance like tiny prayers. Regular customers absorbed in newspapers and quiet conversations, finding their own small sanctuaries in ceramic cups and familiar routines. She understands finally that this isn't really about her dreams of Culinary school or restaurant ownership, it's about becoming part of something larger, a tradition of care that extends back to Isolde and forward into unknown tomorrows. What would you do if you realized your biggest opportunity wasn't about achieving success, but about serving something sacred? I want to do this, she says, voice clear and certain, but not for me, for Isolde, for what she started, for what you're continuing. Stephen's smile transforms his entire face, revealing warmth she never suspected existed beneath his stern exterior. Then let's honor her memory, he says, by feeding people the way she fed us, with recipes that heal, stories that nourish, and love disguised as daily bread. The morning sun reaches across the table, blessing their handshake that seals more than a business deal. It sanctifies a sacred trust point. 3 months pass, like pages turning in a well-loved book. Construction begins on the adjacent space, the sound of hammers and saws creating rhythm for transformation. Serafina splits her time between cafe shifts and culinary classes, her hands learning the language of knives and heat and timing, but also studying Isolde's journal, practicing recipes that feed more than hunger. The Stevens coffee cake becomes her meditation, kneading grief into sweetness the way Isolde taught through written words. Stephen visits twice a week, always at 8 a.m., always ordering black coffee and watching the renovation progress. He speaks little but observes everything, his presence steady as a lighthouse guiding ships through dangerous waters. Today feels different, though the construction crew finished yesterday, leaving behind gleaming stainless steel and empty shelves waiting for stories. Serafina arrives early, keys heavy in her palm, ready to unlock her new kitchen for the first time, but Stephen is already there, standing in the doorway that connects cafe and restaurant, holding something wrapped in white cloth. "Ms. Duskmore," he says formally, "I have something that belongs here." She approaches, curious, as he unwraps what appears to be a cast iron skillet blackened with age and use. This was Isolde's, he explains, her grandmother's. Before that, she cooked everything in this pan, including the first meal she ever served. Meth skillet rests in his large hands like something precious and fragile. "But there's more," he continues, "something I never told Draven or anyone else." Serafina waits, sensing the weight of approaching truth. "Isolde," he says slowly, "was my aunt." The words hang in the morning air, rearranging everything she thought she knew. "Your aunt." "My mother's sister," Stephen continues, voice thick with memory. "When I was 7, my parents divorced, messy and bitter, and I spent summers here with Aunt Isolde, learning to cook in this very kitchen. She taught me that food could be love made tangible, that feeding people was the highest calling." Serafina stares at the skillet, understanding now the true depth of this inheritance. "You've been coming back all these years, not just as a customer, but as family." Stephen nods, returning home to the only place that ever felt completely safe. "When she got sick 5 years ago, I wanted to help, but she was stubborn, independent. Refused my money, said the cafe would find the right person to continue her work, and she was right. The revelation settles between them like morning light illuminating corners previously hidden. That's why you bought the building." Serafina says, "Not as an investment, but to protect her legacy." Stephen places the skillet on the new stainless steel counter, where it looks both ancient and exactly right. "She made me promise," he says, "to find someone who understood that cooking is an act of service, not just a business, someone who would defend this place the way she did, even against difficult customers who might not deserve such loyalty." Serafina laughs, despite the tears threatening to spill. "So, when I told you to go to Starbucks, you knew you'd found Isolde's successor." Stephen finishes, "someone who cared enough to fight for what mattered." The morning sun streams through the new windows, casting long shadows across the empty dining room. Serafina can see it suddenly filled with tables and conversations, and people finding exactly what they need, not just food, but connection, community, the kind of nourishment that happens when strangers become family over shared meals. She picks up the cast iron skillet, feeling its weight, its history, its promise. "I won't let you down," she whispers, to Isolde's memory, to Stephen's trust, to the generations of love this pan has witnessed. Stephen nods, satisfaction warming his usually serious expression. "She knew you wouldn't," he says. "That's why she chose you before you even knew you were being chosen." Some gifts," he continues, "find their way to the right hands through mysterious paths. Yours found theirs through honest anger and fierce protection of something sacred." The restaurant waits, empty but expectant, like a stage before the curtain rises. What would you do if you discovered your greatest opportunity was actually a family calling disguised as chance? Serafina holds Isolde's skillet and finally understands that some inheritances are earned not through blood, but through love the opening is still 2 weeks away, but in this moment surrounded by new equipment and old memories the restaurant already feels like home. 2 weeks later the restaurant breathes with new life. Isolde's kitchen reads the copper sign hanging beside the original cafe entrance, letters gleaming in late afternoon sunlight, marks the soft opening. Friends and family only before tomorrow's public debut. Serafina stands in her pristine kitchen wearing chef's whites that still feel like costume rather than uniform, but Isolde's skillet sits ready on the front burner, seasoned and waiting for its first meal in new surroundings. The menu reflects months of study both in culinary school and in the leather journal that never leaves her side. Stephen's coffee cake, transformed into elegant individual portions, served warm, with lavender honey. Raven's soup, elevated but not altered the same. Healing broth, Isolde perfected for broken hearts. Grandmother's bread, baked fresh every 4 hours, the scent filling both spaces with promise. Lyra bustles between cafe and restaurant, coordinating service, her nervous energy matching Serafina's perfectly. The VE hired 2 additional servers, Kaylin Viral and Talia Ravenshade, both culinary students eager to learn from Isolde's recipes. The first guests arrive at 6. Talon, bringing his elderly mother, who knew Isolde personally. Mrs. Greaves moves slowly through the dining room, touching tables and chairs like she's greeting old friends. This feels right, she tells Serafina. Isolde would approve of what you've created. The words carry more weight than any professional review could. Stephen arrives precisely at 6:30, not alone, but accompanied by a woman Serafina doesn't recognize. She's older, silver-haired, with kind eyes and calloused hands that speak of long years in professional kitchens. This is Chef Morwenna Greydusk. Stephen says, making introductions. Former head chef at Le Bernardin, now retired, but still passionate about places that understand food as medicine. Chef Greydusk extends her hand with the firm grip of someone accustomed to commanding chaotic kitchens. I knew Isolde, she says, simply cooked with her many years ago when we were both young and hungry for knowledge. She taught me that technique, without heart, is just expensive theater. Serafina feels the weight of legacy settling around her like Isolde's apron. Passed down through generations, the evening unfolds with surprising grace. Each dish carries stories from the journal, guests commenting on flavors that feel both familiar and revelatory. The coffee cake draws sighs of recognition from Stephen, who closes his eyes while tasting memory made manifest. Mr. Thornvale abandons his usual stoicism to compliment the soup that reminds him of his grandmother's Sunday dinners. Mrs. Emberfall sketches quietly in the corner, capturing faces illuminated by satisfaction and surprise, but the true test comes at 8 o'clock when the door chimes and an unexpected guest enters. A young man, maybe 25, thin and hollow-eyed, with the look of someone carrying invisible weight. He approaches the hostess station hesitantly, like he's not sure he belongs. I heard, he says quietly, that this place serves comfort food, real comfort food. Talia seats him at table 7 near the window, where afternoon light has softened into evening gold. Serafina watches from the kitchen, recognizing something in his posture. The careful way he holds himself, like someone protecting fresh wounds. She knows without being told that this moment matters more than any review or profit margin. This is why Isolde created her recipes for people who need more than sustenance. She prepares the soup herself using the cast iron pot that belonged to 3 generations of women who understood that feeding people is sacred work. The bowl goes out with fresh bread still warm from the oven and honey butter made that morning from the kitchen. She watches the young man take his first careful spoonful. His shoulders drop slightly, the tension easing as warmth spreads from stomach to spirit. Eats slowly, reverently, like someone who hasn't tasted hope in months. When he finishes, he sits quietly for several minutes, just breathing in the atmosphere of belonging. At the register, he tries to pay, but Talia, following Serafina's whispered instructions, tells him tonight's meal is compliments of Isolde. Doesn't question the explanation, just nods and walks back into the night, standing straighter than when he entered. Chef Greydusk observes this exchange from her corner table, approval shining in her experienced eyes. That, she tells Serafina later, is what real cooking looks like. Not the performance, but the service, not the artistry, but the healing. You understand what Isolde knew, that restaurants at their best are hospitals for hungry souls. The evening winds down with quiet satisfaction, guests lingering over coffee and conversation, reluctant to leave this new sanctuary. Stephen approaches the kitchen window, where Serafina cleans her stations with the methodical care of someone who knows tomorrow brings new challenges. You honored her, he says, simply the highest compliment he knows how to give. In the dining room, empty plates and satisfied murmurs echo Isolde's legacy carried forward by new hands, but unchanged heart. What would you do if your first night proved that some traditions don't just survive transition, but flourish when tended by those who understand their deeper purpose? Serafina hangs up her apron beside Isolde's cast iron skillet, knowing tomorrow will bring its own hungry souls seeking nourishment that goes beyond mere food. The restaurant sleeps, but dreams of all the meals still to be served, all the comfort yet to be given, all the lives waiting to be gently fed back to wholeness. 6 months after opening night, Isolde's kitchen has become what its namesake always intended, a place where strangers discover their family. The morning rush flows between cafe and restaurant with practiced choreography. Lyra's espresso machine harmonizing with the sizzle of Serafina's breakfast skillets. The cast iron pan that once belonged to 3 generations of nurturing women now feeds dozens daily, its surface gleaming with layers of love and countless meals. Stephen still arrives at 8 a.m. sharp, but his corner table has expanded to include others who found sanctuary in this space. Mr. Thornvale now brings his grandson every Saturday, teaching the boy to appreciate simple pleasures, fresh bread, and patient conversation. Mrs. Emberfall has filled 2 sketchbooks with portraits of people discovering joy in unexpected places. Her art documenting the quiet miracles that happen daily over shared food. But today brings something special, a visitor Serafina never expected to see again. The young man from opening night returns no longer hollow-eyed, but accompanied by a woman his age and a toddler who clutches a worn stuffed rabbit. They request the same table by the window where healing first took root. Wanted to bring my family, he tells Serafina when she approaches their table, to show them the place that saved my life. His name is Darian Foxmere, she learns, and 6 months ago, he'd lost his job, his apartment, his sense of purpose. That night, when he wandered in seeking comfort food, he'd been planning to give up entirely, but the soup, the warmth, the feeling of being welcomed without judgment had reminded him that kindness still existed. Now, he works at a local nonprofit helping other young people navigate crisis and often brings them to Isolde's kitchen when words aren't enough, but nourishment might be. This is what Isolde would have wanted. Serafina realizes watching Darian's daughter giggle over her bowl of soup, not just individual healing, but ripples of care spreading outward generation to generation. The lunch crowd brings its own stories, business people who've discovered that the 15-minute walk from downtown offices leads to something more valuable than convenience. College students pooling resources for communal meals that taste like the home cooking they miss. Elderly neighbors who've found new friendship over afternoon tea and Isolde's legendary scones. Each table holds its own small drama of connection and comfort, but the greatest transformation belongs to Serafina herself. She moves through her kitchen with confidence earned through months of practice and countless acts of service. The girl who once saved every penny for culinary school has become a chef through different means, studying under Isolde's gentle tutelage and Stephen's quiet mentorship. Chef Grey Dusk visits monthly, offering techniques and wisdom, but always emphasizing that Serafina's instincts, her understanding of food as medicine, cannot be taught, only honored. The restaurant has earned recognition not through critics or social media buzz, but through word of mouth and repeat customers who bring friends, who bring family, who bring their own hunger for belonging. A food blogger discovered them 3 months ago, writing a review that captured something essential. Isolde's kitchen doesn't serve Instagram-worthy plates or molecular gastronomy. It serves something far more precious, the feeling that someone cares whether you're fed, truly fed in body and spirit. The review brought crowds for a few weeks, but they were the wrong kind of customers seeking novelty rather than nourishment. Serafina learned to recognize the difference between those who came to be seen eating and those who came to be seen. The former found the menu too simple, the atmosphere too quiet, and moved on to trendier places. The latter became regulars. Stephen watches this natural selection with satisfaction, understanding that Isolde's vision was never about mass appeal, but about authentic connection. On quiet afternoons, when the lunch rush fades into coffee and conversation, he shares stories about his aunt, her philosophy of hospitality as sacred calling she believed. He tells Serafina one Tuesday, while they inventory the wine cellar that restaurants could be churches without religion, places where people gathered to celebrate the simple miracle of being alive and cared for. This understanding permeates everything from the way servers learn each customer's preferred table to how Serafina adjusts recipes based on individual dietary needs and emotional states. The grandmother's bread has become legendary not for its complexity, but for its consistency, the way it appears warm and waiting whenever someone enters looking particularly lost. Children receive small cookies shaped like stars while their parents decompress over coffee and the luxury of adult conversation. Elderly diners never eat alone if other solo patrons are present. Gentle introductions, facilitating friendships that extend beyond these walls. But perhaps the most profound change is in how Serafina sees herself, no longer the defensive waitress protecting her territory from difficult customers. Now she's a guardian of something sacred, keeper of traditions that transform simple ingredients into healing. The question that opened this story echoes differently now. What would you do if the person you mocked turned out to own everything you depend on? She knows now that Stephen never owned her future. He simply recognized what she already possessed, the fierce loyalty and protective instinct that Isolde had cultivated in this space for decades. The real ownership belongs to something larger than any individual, the timeless human need for places where we can be fed, not just physically, but spiritually. Evening approaches with its familiar rhythm, last customers settling tabs and making plans to return tomorrow or next week or whenever they need reminding that they matter. Serafina cleans her kitchen with meditative care, each surface prepared for tomorrow's service, tomorrow's opportunity to participate in the ancient ritual of caring for others through food. The cast iron skillet rests on its hook, ready for morning when the cycle begins again. Coffee to wake up, bread to sustain, soup to comfort, cake to celebrate the endless variety of human hunger, and the blessed certainty that there will always be hands willing to feed it. In the dining room, Stephen finishes his evening coffee, same corner table where this story began with insult and ignorance but ends with understanding and grace. He leaves his usual $20 tip, though prices have long since been adjusted to reflect the restaurant's true worth. The gesture is no longer about money, but about maintaining connection to the morning when everything changed. Serafina locks the doors behind the last customer, exhausted but satisfied in the way that comes from work that matters. Outside, the city continues its restless motion, but inside, Isolde's kitchen waits in peaceful readiness for tomorrow's gathering of souls, seeking nourishment and finding so much more. The copper sign gleams in streetlight, bearing witness to the truth that some legacies never die. They simply find new hands to carry them forward, and sometimes those hands belong to someone who learned their worth through a single moment of honest rudeness that revealed a heart worth investing in. What would you do if you discovered your greatest failure was actually your finest audition for the role you were always meant to play? Serafina knows the answer, carries it in every meal she prepares, every customer she serves, every tradition she honors. She would do exactly what she's doing, feeding people with love disguised as daily bread. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe. Sometimes our biggest mistakes become our greatest opportunities, and every act of service, no matter how small, has the power to change lives. 2 years have passed since that fateful morning when sharp words and wounded pride collided at table 12, creating ripples that continue to spread far beyond anyone's imagination. Isolde's kitchen has become more than a restaurant. It's evolved into an institution, a landmark, a beacon for anyone seeking proof that kindness still exists in an increasingly disconnected world. The changes are subtle but profound. The original cafe space has been expanded twice, not through aggressive renovation, but through organic growth that honors the building's historic bones. Stephen purchased the vintage clothing boutique on the corner when it closed, transforming it into a community space where cooking classes happen on Tuesday evenings and support groups meet on Thursday afternoons. Serafina teaches these classes herself, using recipes from Isolde's journal as starting points for lessons that go far deeper than technique. Students learn to make the grandmother's bread while sharing stories about their own grandmothers. They practice the healing soup while discussing what comfort means in their own lives. The classes are always full, with a waiting list that extends months into the future, not because people are seeking celebrity chef instruction, but because they hunger for something harder to find: authentic connection over shared purpose. Chef Greydusk has become a regular presence, officially consulting, but really just enjoying the community that's grown around Serafina's vision. She brings other retired chefs sometimes, masters of their crafts who find renewal in this place where ego takes back seat to empathy. The restaurant has spawned unexpected partnerships. The nonprofit where Darian Foxmere works has established a program called Isolde's Table, a weekly dinner for anyone experiencing homelessness, food insecurity, or simply loneliness. These meals happen after regular service hours, prepared by volunteers who learned in Serafina's classes that cooking for others is both privilege and responsibility. Stephen's investment has expanded beyond the building itself. He's quietly funded similar projects in 3 other cities, always seeking out passionate individuals who understand that hospitality is a calling rather than merely a career. The network they've created, though Stephen would never use such a corporate term, operates on principles Isolde would recognize: genuine care, patient service, and the belief that everyone deserves to be fed well. But perhaps the most profound change is in Serafina herself. She's become someone she never imagined possible. A business owner, yes, but more importantly, a community leader. Local newspapers profile her regularly, not for her culinary achievements, but for her approach to hospitality as social healing. She speaks at conferences about sustainable restaurant practices, though her definition of sustainability includes emotional and spiritual nourishment alongside environmental consciousness. The young woman who once saved every penny for culinary school now provides scholarships for others with similar dreams but limited resources. She's partnered with the community college to create an apprenticeship program that combines traditional culinary training with Isolde's philosophy of food as medicine. These apprentices learn knife skills and sauce techniques, but they also study the subtle art of reading customers' emotional needs, of recognizing when someone requires more than food, when they need witness, comfort, or simply the dignity of being seen as human. The morning ritual continues unchanged. Stephen arrives at 8 a.m., orders black coffee, sits at his corner table. But now that table often hosts informal meetings, with city planners discussing food desert solutions, with social workers coordinating community support, with other restaurant owners seeking guidance on creating spaces that serve souls alongside stomachs. The cast iron skillet that once belonged to Isolde has been joined by others, each carrying its own history. A copper pot from Chef Greydusk's grandmother. A wooden spoon carved by Darian's father during his recovery from addiction. Kitchen tools that bridge generations and stories, creating an informal museum of culinary heritage within the working restaurant. Today brings another full-circle moment as a young woman enters during the lunch rush, clearly nervous, clutching a worn resume and hands that shake slightly. She approaches the hostess station where Talia, now assistant manager, greets her with genuine warmth. Serafina observes from the kitchen window, recognizing something familiar in the girl's posture. The careful way she holds herself, the hunger that goes beyond food, the desperate hope barely contained behind defensive walls. Her name is Luna Starweaver, Talia reports later. 18 years old, aging out of foster care, sleeping on friends' couches while working 2 part-time jobs that don't quite cover basic expenses. She heard about Isolde's Kitchen through the nonprofit network, was told this might be a place that hires people for potential rather than just experience. Serafina interviews her during the afternoon lull, asking questions that probe character rather than credentials. What does hospitality mean to you? How do you handle difficult customers? When have you felt truly cared for? And how did that experience shape you? Luna's answers reveal someone who understands struggle intimately, who's learned that kindness is choice rather than luxury, who sees service work as opportunity to create moments of grace in others' lives, but she's hired on the spot. Starting as prep cook with opportunities to advance based on dedication and heart rather than formal training. 3 months later, Luna has become indispensable, not just for her quick hands and reliable presence, but for her intuitive understanding of Isolde's philosophy. She notices the regular customer who's been ordering smaller portions lately, gently asking if everything's okay and learning about recent medical bills that have tightened his budget. She remembers that the elderly woman at table 3 prefers her tea extra hot because arthritis makes her hands cold. These small attentions ripple outward, creating the kind of environment where customers become community members, where strangers offer each other rides home during storms, where birthdays are celebrated and losses mourned by people who met over soup and stayed for belonging. The restaurant's success has attracted offers, franchising opportunities, cookbook deals, television appearances. Serafina turns them all down, understanding instinctively that what they've created cannot be replicated through corporate expansion or media exposure. This isn't about scaling up, but about going deeper. Each day brings new opportunities to practice Isolde's teachings, to demonstrate that businesses can prioritize human flourishing alongside financial sustainability. The question that began this story, what would you do if the person you mocked turned out to own everything you depend on, has evolved into something more complex and beautiful. What would you do if you discovered that the things you depend on most cannot be owned at all? That security comes not from controlling circumstances, but from building relationships? That the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property, but wisdom about how to care for others. Stephen understood this when he chose to invest in Serafina's potential rather than her credentials. Isolde understood it when she documented her recipes, alongside the stories of people they healed. Serafina understands it now as she watches Luna adjust a soup recipe based on a customer's dietary restrictions while explaining to a newer employee why such modifications matter. The legacy lives not in buildings or bank accounts, but in the countless small acts of service that happen daily. The way each meal becomes an opportunity to demonstrate that everyone matters, that everyone deserves to be fed well, that everyone belongs somewhere. Evening falls over the city, and Isolde's kitchen prepares for another dinner service. The copper sign catches the last light, bearing witness to another day of ordinary miracles disguised as daily bread. Inside, Serafina checks her mise en place one final time, runs her hand across the scarred surface of the wooden prep table, where hundreds of meals have been born from love and intention. Tomorrow will bring new faces, new stories, new opportunities to participate in the ancient human ritual of caring for others through food. The circle continues, unbroken and ever-expanding, carried forward by hands that understand their sacred responsibility to feed not just bodies but souls. And in the corner booth where it all began, Steven Seagal sits with his evening coffee, reading messages from the 3 other cities where Isolde's philosophy has taken root, where other passionate individuals are discovering that their biggest mistakes can become their finest opportunities, that their deepest wounds can become sources of healing for others. The story continues, not because it has an ending, but because it has no end, only infinite beginnings, one meal at a time. Thank you for sharing this journey with Serafina, Stephen, and the community of Isolde's Kitchen. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Sometimes our greatest failures become our most profound successes, and every act of service, no matter how small, has the power to transform lives. What small act of kindness will you offer today?